Natalie and welcome back to my channel. So this is actually the first video in my new series called Accessibility Tales, where I'm gonna tell you guys all of the crazy accessibility related stories that I have experienced throughout my life. So when I was in college, I had an internship at a reality television production company in the financial district of Manhattan. But I was also enrolled in New York University's summer program, so I was able to stay in the student housing at NYU, take a class or two that I could transfer back to my original four-year university. And then I was also able to have an internship in New York City. During that time, I was studying film production, and so I had the internship at the television production company in their pre-production department. And since I lived in the student housing at NYU, I was located near Washington Square Park. And so my commute to work and back was actually pretty fast. With the public transportation in New York City being so accessible, I had the option of either taking the bus or the subway to work, and it was just a straight shot down Broadway, and it was perfect. Really convenient, or so I thought. The first few weeks in New York were quite an adjustment. I was used to either walking everywhere or driving my van everywhere I needed to go. Since I lived in the Midwest in a smaller town and all that, we didn't have a large public transportation system, so I was used to driving everywhere. So learning how to navigate the subway system and the bus system and all that stuff, there was definitely a learning curve involved, especially because with the subway system, not every stop of the subway system is wheelchair accessible, so only certain stops have elevators and ramps and all that stuff. The MTA website has a detailed map of the subway system and all the stops that are accessible, and all of the buses have ramps, but it was always quicker to take the subway if it was an option. So I ended up studying the map every morning and memorizing it, and then also I would check the website every day that I woke up on work days to see if there were any elevators that were either not working or they were down for maintenance or whatever, so that then I would know I'd have to take the bus that morning instead of the subway and plan accordingly. This system I worked out worked really well. For weeks, I had no problems taking the subway every morning to work, or I would be informed that the elevators weren't working and I would be able to take the bus. I was never late to work. I was early most of the time, actually. At this point in time, I was like, amazing. I don't understand what everyone's complaining about. New York City has the most accessible, trustworthy public transportation system I have ever experienced in my entire life. And then, of course, the nightmare occurred. I woke up one morning, did what I normally would do. I checked the MTA website. It said all the elevators were working. I would always, just in case, check the elevators in Brooklyn just to see if any of the elevators in Brooklyn were not working. Because if for some reason the elevators at the last stop in Manhattan were not working, I would have to go into Brooklyn and then switch back over to the Uptown train, go back into Manhattan, and then get up onto the street that way. That was always my backup plan if for some reason the elevators in the financial district weren't working. So I checked the map that day, and I was informed that all of the elevators in Brooklyn were not working. Every single one was down, but every elevator from where I had to get on the train to where I had to get off the train, all of those were working. So I was like, great, awesome. I'll still take the subway, no issues, I'll be on time, it'll be great. Yeah. So I got on the subway that day, took the train downtown to the last stop in the financial district, got off the train, went to the elevator that would transfer me from the downtown platform to the uptown platform, and the exit was on the uptown platform. So I go to the elevator, press the button, nothing happens. Press it again, nothing happens. There are no signs on the elevator saying that it's down for maintenance or it's not working. So I got my phone out, I went to go text my boss and tell him I was gonna be late. In this situation, it wasn't an option for me to get back on the train, go into Brooklyn, transfer to the uptown platform, go back uptown, and then be able to get out of the subway station. So I went to go text him, and I didn't have any service, which means I also can't call the MTA hotline to tell them the elevator's down, and I need someone to come get me out of the subway. But it also means I can't call 911. And I looked around on the platform, everyone had left the station. And I also am not able to physically use the emergency phones that they have in the subway system stations. So I'm like, okay, cool. Thankfully, I took the subway with my assistant that day. So it's funny how things like that happen. But anyway, so I asked her to go up the stairs, go onto the uptown platform, and tell the ticket office that the elevator was down on the downtown platform and that all the elevators were broken in Brooklyn, so there was no way for me to get off the platform. So she's sitting there explaining this to the person, and they're not helping her. They're like, well, we can't do anything. If the elevator's broken, someone will have to come fix it and then get her out of the subway. They're like, it can take hours. And I'm like, I have to be at work. I can't be stuck down in the subway for hours. Secondly, it's really hot down there in the summer. Like, this is the summer too. So it's really humid in New York in the summer. It's extremely hot in New York in the summer. So I'm like, I can't be stuck in the subway for hours. So I go on, and she's gone. She's like waiting in line because this line was very long. So it took her a while to get to the actual MTA employee to tell them this. So we're like, okay. So I'm sitting there, and at this point, I also informed like 3 strangers of what was going on and asked them if they could, once they got out of the subway, to like call MTA and tell them what's going on, because the ticket office wasn't being helpful. They wouldn't call anyone to come and fix the elevator or see if it was just turned off, because come to find out, they actually turn off elevators like every night starting at 11 p.m. and they don't turn them back on until like 7 a.m. for some reason. I'm like, okay, great. So I guess I can't travel between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. on the subway, but that's a whole nother issue. But yeah, so I told like 3 strangers what was going on, because I'm like, well, I probably should just see what happens. Like, if I tell strangers, like, I need help, can you please call like the MTA hotline and tell them it's an emergency, or like call 911 and tell them it's an emergency that someone's stuck in the subway system, because I'm like, if I take the subway on my own, what would I do in this situation? Like, I have no cell service, can't call anyone. So I also am telling, the subway conductors this too, and see if they can do anything. Well, I told one of the subway conductors, and she actually circled her entire train route 5 times within the amount of time I was sitting on the subway. I told this woman, I saw her 5 different times, and she kept pulling up on the train, and she was like, you're still here? You're still down here? I'm like, yep, no one's come to help me. I'm just stuck. So by this point, we had decided, my assistant came back to where it was on the downtown platform, and we basically decided, we have to call 911. There's no way that I'm gonna get out of the subway any other way, because if they have to call maintenance and have to have someone come and fix the elevator and all that stuff, we don't know how long it's gonna take. So we called the fire department, and the fire department comes, and so they bring this chair. It's called a fire evacuation chair. So basically, it's like a small metal chair, and they transferred me to that. And then they had lift straps to carry my power chair up the escalator. And then once they got my power chair off the downtown platform, they came back and transferred me up the escalator in the stair chair, or fire evacuation chair. I think those terms are interchangeable. Anyway, yeah, so they get me to the uptown platform, and then on the uptown platform, they start transporting my power chair up the escalator up to the street. And during this time, I'm talking to the fire department and just kind of asking them, like, is this something you have to do often? Like, do you have to get people that use wheelchairs out of the subway system often? And he's like, it happens a lot more frequently than you would think. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So this isn't like something they're not used to having to do, because they were doing this very fast, like very quickly. So you can tell they had some practice. But I was like, well, I mean, I guess it's a good thing that they're quick at responding to calls like this and that they're used to having to do this. But also, like, why? Why does this happen so often? Like, this is kind of weird. And I'm talking to the firefighter, and he's like, yeah, it always happens in the morning or like late at night. And I'm thinking to myself, huh, well, that can't really be a coincidence, right? That this never happens in the middle of the day. It always happens in the morning or at night, late at night. And I'm like, that's weird. So anyway, the firefighter starts preparing with his partner to carry me up the escalator in the stair chair. And this is when an MTA maintenance employee just happens to see us. So I guess he was doing his rounds or something. So he comes up to us and goes, oh, do you guys need the elevator turned on? I'm like, what? What do you mean? Do we need the elevator turned on? I'm like, what? So the entire time, the elevator had just been turned off. So it wasn't broken. It was just off. Like, and I had to call 911 to get me out of the subway, and I had to waste the fire department's precious time just to get me out of the subway system. Like, I was like, what? You've got to be kidding me. Anyway, so the firefighter, he looks at the MTA employee and goes, yeah, we need the elevator on. And the MTA employee's like, oh, okay, yeah, sure thing. Let me turn it on right now. So he pulls the key out of his pocket, turns the elevator on, and just goes, all right, there you go. And the firefighter wheels me into the elevator. The door closes, and he's like, that's ridiculous. I'm like, yeah, that is ridiculous. We're just like, what? Sorry, I'm cracking myself up just because it was so ridiculous. So anyway, so yeah, then they'd already carried my wheelchair out of the subway, so I just take the elevator up in the stair chair, and they transfer me back into my power chair, and then I was on my way, and I went to work. But I thanked them because that was just crazy. I'm so glad though that the fire department came and got me out of the subway, but that was just crazy. But come to find out that, yeah, it's like a normal thing, because I ran into this issue again about a week later. I was coming home from a musical in Times Square, and I had gotten dinner prior to the show, and I had gotten drinks with my friends after the show. And so at this point, it was probably about like 11:30, almost midnight. And so we're like, oh, okay, it's getting pretty late. Let's take the subway back up to, NYU campus. So we get on the subway together, the elevators in Times Square are working. So I go down to the subway platform to take the subway back downtown, and like there are multiple subway stops I have to like transfer out and stuff to get back to the apartment, and all of the elevators, like half the elevators were busted. So like I wasn't able to take the elevators all the way back home because they were either busted or turned off. And so after like the second elevator not working, I ended up asking like an MTA employee, "Second, bud, can you lay down please?" So after the second elevator wasn't working, I asked one of the MTA employees, and this is when I found out about the rule, I guess, that they turn off most of the elevators in New York City after 11 p.m. and don't turn them back on until 7 a.m. So that was interesting. This was a few years ago. So I do have to say I don't know if this is still a policy that they follow, but yeah, I was like, that's strange. And it's not every elevator, it's only in certain neighborhoods in certain areas. So yeah, it was very odd. So it's weird. It's like New York City has amazing transportation, accessibility wise, but the elevator thing, it's just weird. Like I don't get why they turn the elevators off. I understand turning them off for maintenance, but like, just cause, it's just odd. I don't get it. Other than that, New York was fantastic. It was so fun. I learned so much in those classes at NYU and in my internship, and it was a great experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything. So yeah, let me know what your experience has been like with the public transportation system in your area. And also, what do you guys think of New York City? Have you been there before? Do you enjoy it? Yeah, let me know in the comments down below. All right, that's it for today's video. If you've enjoyed today's content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click that little bell button down below to receive a notification the next time I upload a video. I hope you have a phenomenal day, and I will see you next time. Bye, guys. You're so cute. I got your ball? Yay! Good boy. But every elevator from but every